Hello, everyone. It is January 4th, 2019. I am Dr. John DeLynn, and we are so excited to welcome you to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Today, we have as an interviewee someone who, for me, is one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, and inspiring Mormons I've met in my 14 years of doing Mormon Stories Podcast. We're going to be interviewing someone who's become a dear friend. Her name is Anna or Renata Reading, and she was born and raised in Switzerland as a member of the Mormon Church. This episode has so much to offer. Some of you will know that recently with my wife, Margie, and Natasha Elfer Parker, we've launched a project called The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis, and you can find more information about that at mormonfaithcrisis.com. But this continues a series that we've been doing on Mormon Stories for many years, where we allow people to tell their faith journeys and their journeys as devout, Orthodox, believing Mormons, and their journeys as they begin to question and doubt and eventually lose faith in at least Orthodox Mormonism, and then how they deal with that. This is very much going to be a part of Anna's story. We're going to be talking about her life growing up as a devout member of the Mormon Church in Switzerland with, I'll say, a semi-functional family, how she clung to the church in her teen years, because it provided her support and comfort and solace. We'll talk about an epic boyfriend / relationship that she had as a teenage girl in Switzerland. We'll talk about and how it tragically ended. We'll talk about her mission that she served in Ireland, how she eventually went to BYU and found Bill, her husband, and how she and Bill lived the Mormon dream for many, many years, serving in high-level callings until that, in some ways, came crashing down. And how, most importantly, to people who are in a faith crisis, who are struggling, Anna will talk to us about what that was like for her, what it was like for her to struggle, and how she has managed a mixed faith relationship with her husband, Bill. So there will be a mixed faith marriage element to this story, as well as how she's managed her relationship with her 4 children, most, if not all of whom are remaining believing Mormons at some level or another, although that, sometimes can change. And we'll talk about how Anna has healed and picked up her life after her faith crisis, and how she is doing now, and how she's rebuilding a life of health and healing afterwards. We are live streaming this episode, and we're super excited to do that. And we have several people who are already joining us now on our live Facebook stream, and including Muche from Poland, Brandon, James. We welcome everyone who's joining us on our live stream. We hope that you will post questions and comments on the live stream, because that makes these interviews more interesting and more interactive. I also just want to let you guys know that we will be kicking off a new round of workshops and retreats this year. They won't be done through the Open Stories Foundation. They'll be done through the Mormon Faith Crisis website that you can go to at mormonfaithcrisis.com. But if you are interested in attending a workshop or a retreat, or hosting a workshop or retreat, I first met Anna when she hosted a workshop or a retreat that we had in Switzerland just a few months ago. And that was a real pleasure for me and for those who were involved. But if you are interested in attending or hosting a workshop or retreat in your city, we encourage you to reach out at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com and let us know. We will be announcing our calendar of workshops and retreats in the coming weeks. And so we want to make sure you know that those are available at, again, mormonfaithcrisis.com/events. And so that is all the announcements that we have. And so without any further ado, Ana reading, you're known as Ana Leyendo on Facebook. Welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you for that really kind introduction. And I really enjoy this new podcast that you're doing, the gift of the faith crisis. And I'm finally starting to see it as a gift. So thank you for doing that. I enjoy it.
You didn't always feel it was a gift, did you?
No. No, not for a while.
Natasha is really good to remind me that I have to be careful when I say the gift of the faith crisis, because when you're in the middle of it, it feels like hell. It feels like sheer
but a gift, yes.
Yeah. But and I've been with you through some of those times where you weren't feeling like it was a gift. So for me, it's very nice to hear you say you're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, because you went through some dark moments. Is that true?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, there were times when I wished I had never started to doubt anything, and why couldn't I just continue until the end of my life the way I was?
Yeah. Well, we're so grateful that you are willing to share your story with us. I am not exaggerating when I say you're one of my favorite people that I've ever met in my 14 years of doing Mormon stories. So,
well, thank you very much. And you're one of my favorites. So I really enjoyed that Mormon stories. Still think it's a miracle that it came to be. So
thank you. This is the second, for those who don't know, this is the second interview we've done from Switzerland. Just a few months ago, we did Philipp Giesler, and he talked about his Swiss Mormon journey. And we've interviewed several other people, including people from Sweden and Norway, and I believe Germany. And we want to continue interviewing people from all over the globe. So if you are a Mormon or a post-Mormon from a country other than the United States, and you feel like you want to represent your country, or at least a story from your country, we want to invite you to email us at mormonstories@gmail.com, and we would love to help you tell your story as well. All right, Ana, let's jump into your amazing story. Is that all right?
Okay.
How does someone in Switzerland become a Mormon? How does that happen?
Yes, that's a good question. Somebody asked me that outside of the church, said, how did a regular girl like you, become a Mormon? And actually, I'm already a third generation Mormon. So my grandmother joined on my father's side, and as early as, I think it was like around 1918 or something, in Basel. And she was a young woman then. And she had a very difficult childhood. Her mother had died when she was 11, and her father had then killed himself. And she was farmed off to some strangers where she had to work. She was I think it's called an indentured child laborer. And when she finally and during that time, what kept her was really her faith in God. And then when she was on her own, and she overheard her minister talking to someone else and making fun of religion and saying he didn't believe any of the stuff he taught on Sunday. And that totally destroyed her. And that's how she tells the story. She went home and prayed and asked God to give her a sign whether he existed. And it was just a couple days later, according to her story, that the missionaries knocked on her door. And so she felt like it was a direct answer to her prayer. And she joined the church, and so did her husband. And they had a child, and that's my father. But
So you're a third generation Swiss Mormon.
I am. Yes, I am.
And what year approximately would your grandma have joined the church?
I think around 1918. So it's like almost 100 years ago.
1918. That's amazing.
I know. She was born in 1894.
Holy moly.
Oh, yeah.
And the Switzerland Temple wouldn't have been built yet, right?
Oh, no. That wasn't built until the 50s,
Okay. So there probably wouldn't have been more than 1,000 Swiss Mormons at the time she joined?
I think so, yeah. There were very few. I wouldn't know the exact numbers. She was one of the first members there in Basel. the mission office was still in Basel. And a lot of these original members have emigrated to the States. But she couldn't because, she got divorced and she was a single mom and she didn't have the money to go to the States.
Right.
So she remained behind. In fact, I was once at a 1st of August celebration. That's our national holiday in Salt Lake with a bunch of people that used to know my father as a child. So, and also in Midway, there's a whole bunch of these Swiss that emigrated.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swiss days.
So, yeah, my father grew up in the church, and he had a difficult childhood because my grandmother, I think, was a very difficult person. She was a drama queen, and she was, lots of difficult things about her. And so, when he was a young man, he got married, and he converted the person he was getting married to. She was Jewish. And they had 2 children, 2 sons. But then he got divorced as well. And he left Basel. And he was inactive for quite some time. And then he got active again and married again in Zurich. And he had 2 more girls at that point. And then my mother started working for them as a nanny.
Uh-oh, wait a minute. So if your mother... We've got a Fanny Alger situation there. So if your mother is working for him while he's married, that doesn't bode well for the second marriage.
Right. And she was also a lot younger. She was 16 years younger than him. And yeah, they had an affair, but not until after he had baptized her into the church. So she was not a member, but he baptized her. And she was telling me always that she had been a Billy Graham believer. She had seen him in Geneva and had believed in him. And then she loved the Mormon church because they had a living prophet. That really appealed to her, that there was a prophet speaking today. And so, yeah, he baptized her, but then he had an affair, and he got excommunicated for this. And but my mom stayed in the church, and I was born. Shortly after that, I was a result of this.
That's got to be weird to join God's One True Church in the midst of participating in an extramarital affair.
I think so. Yeah, I can only.
Did your mom ever talk about that contradiction, or was that too deep to go?
My mom was not a person that could really talk about her feelings.
Okay.
But she did always say, don't ever do what I did, don't ever follow my example. So she did feel like it was bad, but she didn't really talk about it.
Okay.
So then they got married, also they got married before I was born.
So this was your dad's third marriage.
It's my dad's third marriage. Yeah, and he already had 4 other children, so.
Would that have been super unconventional for Switzerland at the time, or normal?
No, I think it was unconventional.
Okay.
But my grandmother had been married 4 times. So, it was kind of a pattern there. Yeah, and so they moved to Bern. This had been in Zurich, and they moved to Bern. And the ward in Bern was really, really good. They just fellowshipped them. My dad was still excommunicated. He was not a member, but he was drinking and he was smoking, but they befriended this new family so much, that my dad got rebaptized, and we became active in the church. But he always told this story before he got rebaptized, that there was this, he had to have some kind of permission, I guess. I don't know exactly how that went, but President Hinckley was, at that time, he wasn't the president, he was just an apostle, or maybe even a 70, I don't know. Anyway, he was in Switzerland, and he was talking with the mission president. He said to him, according to my dad, that we don't want people like this guy in the church, saying that about my dad.
That was going to be Hinckley.
Yes.
That's not nice.
I remember that I never liked him. Yeah, I never liked him because of that. I thought, he doesn't want my dad. I wouldn't be in the church if this mission president had listened to him. But maybe, I don't know if it's a true story, but that's what my dad would tell. So yeah, then he actually got baptized again in time to baptize me. So he couldn't give me, the Holy Ghost. He didn't have the priesthood. He didn't have the Melchizedek priesthood yet, but he could baptize me. So,
and did he ever explain how he was a devout Mormon and had so many affairs? And did he ever talk about
well,
he tormented with shame? Was he?
Yeah, he was more open about his feelings, and he was a talker while my mom wasn't. Yeah, he did. He always said that he believed in the church. He always said the church is true, but there are bad people in it. There are, I was a person that didn't live according to the gospel. I was weak because of, problems from my childhood and stuff, but the church is true. And so this gave me this desire to be this person that my dad hadn't been, to always be this faithful person that was, that didn't make the mistakes he had made. And yeah, that would always be a good person, so to speak.
Yeah, kind of be Nephi, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So what was it like growing up in Bern, Switzerland as a Mormon girl?
Right. I mean, I was the only Mormon in school except for my brother, who was 1 year younger than me. And so as a child, I think it was not so bad. It was a bit weird, but it was okay. It's just, it's like, because my family had problems. I mean, my dad's, even after he got baptized again and stuff, he still continued to have many problems. He had a pill addiction. He kept taking sleeping pills and then pills to function during the day and stuff like this. And my parents would fight a lot and stuff. And so the church for me was a place where I found what I didn't have at home. I found good families. I found people that were strong and good, and it made me feel comforted, and I wanted to have families like these, good families in the Lord, and I wanted to be like them. So that in that sense, the church was really good for me. And I remember we still had church in the morning and in the evening, and then on Wednesday afternoon we had primary. And I don't remember how old I was, maybe 7, 8. I wanted to learn ballet. And then, but it was on Wednesday afternoon. And I had this choice, either go to primary or do ballet. And I remember thinking, I must choose the right thing, and I didn't do ballet, and I went to primary. And I always thought that in heaven then I would learn ballet. So I'm a bit disappointed to realize that that's not happening now. So, I mean, that just shows you how important it was. Like that my parents left me the choice, and I chose primary. So it was something that was very important to me, even as a child.
And I really relate to that. When my parents got divorced, the church really was a support for me, and a place that I could rely on, a place that I could get comfort and community, and it meant a great deal.
Right. And it gave me sort of this sense, like I'm a child of God, it's like I am more than a child of this broken family. There's like this divine in me, and I can become divine. I really liked that idea, so yeah. And I was a very imaginative child, I was always putting on plays and making bazaars and flea markets and all these things, And for example, one time we were collecting all these things to sell at a big bazaar. And then in Switzerland, apparently that's not allowed, not even for children. somebody had called the police, and the police called my parents, and they said, you have to donate all this money to a good cause. You can't keep this money. And it was about 300 francs, which is a lot of money for kids, you know. And I said, okay, let's donate it to, I forgot what it was, disabled children. And these other kids that were with me in this, they felt like, we could just give 10 francs to these disabled children and the rest will keep, nobody will know. And this was the parents of my friends that were saying this. And I was saying to them, you have a cross on the wall and you supposedly believe in Jesus, but then you would cheat like that, you know. And I was only like 9 or something. You know, it's like, it was very important to me to be honest and to actually live what I learned. So yeah, and that just, and like there's like a funny story from my childhood that probably my neighbors thought I was really strange, and I now realize how strange that was. But I always knew that the bad in the world came from Satan.
Right.
So I had this idea I could kill him, and then there would be no more bad, you know. So I was telling my friend, I was telling my friend, we will just close all the holes in our room and everything that he could get into, because I knew he was a spirit. And then we will yell at each other and he will be there, and then we can kill him. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense.
With what weapon?
Well, we were using towels, you know. So it's child's logic. But the parents of that other child must have thought we were really strange, the Mormons. But it was just my own strange ideas. I had to realize I couldn't kill Satan.
Right. Bummer.
Yeah, that would have been a good thing.
Okay. What else? Tell us more about your childhood.
Yeah, well, I think that's about it, about the childhood. But maybe as I was getting older, it got more difficult, you know, to be a member. It was more apparent that we were different, you know, that we didn't drink alcohol. And they were like some parents of some friends that we were there, and we were relatively young. I don't know, 12, maybe 13. And they wanted us all to drink some wine, and they almost forced me. And, you know, I then went and poured it into a plant and stuff. And, you know, so it became more and more obvious that we were different. And it's like, as I went into high school, that's, I think, when it really became more apparent that we are strange. Let's put it like that.
What was the predominant religion in Bern at the time you were growing up?
Secularism.
Okay. So
yeah, most people did not
half.
really. Yeah, most of my friends did not really believe anything, you know, or just superficially, maybe they were, you know, they were Protestant, but they didn't really go to church. They didn't really believe, you know. So yeah, most people, and especially in high school, religion was, I didn't have any friends that were religious.
And did people have a stereotype or a perception of Mormons? Had the Osmonds swept the globe yet? Like, what was Mormonism even in the Bern, Switzerland zeitgeist?
Somewhat, you know, they were like lots. I mean, they know polygamy. I know that was always the first thing. Oh, so your father has many wives, you know. In the case of my father,
I mean, he kind of did.
Yeah, sequentially, but still. Yeah, but or they would say, oh, you know, are you in a cult? Do you have to do the things that your leaders tell you? You know, there were like other stories of cults going around, you know, and there was once a person asked me if there was like a tunnel from the Swiss temple all the way through to the Salt Lake temple. You know, so there were some weird myths going around. It was obviously some kind of a weird religion. I remember one of my teachers in junior high school, I had written an essay about Joseph Smith and his death, his martyrdom, as I put it in the story. And he then pulled me out afterwards and he said, you realize that this whole religion stands on very shaky ground. And now I actually agree with him. But anyway, I, of course, you know, was very upset by this. You know, I thought, how can he say something like this? And I was extremely offended. And And yeah, I didn't
That's probably inappropriate for a teacher to tell a student, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is just like that, when I'm just a child, and I don't know how to defend myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was also like teachers that would say in class that Jesus was just a fairy tale figure, so that kind of thing you can't probably imagine in America, but it was like, it was normal for most teachers to be atheists or non-believers at least.
That's probably different than the American Mormon experience, because
yes,
I think most American Mormon kids would probably have had Christian teachers.
Right. So I had this strange double feeling of, on the one hand, I felt like I was really weird and I never quite fit. But on the other hand, I felt like I was special. I was chosen. I was the one of the few that had the truth. And so it kind of gave me this positive feeling as well, besides feeling weird. And
that's part of the power of Mormonism. You feel set off from the world. It's sort of like not of the world. I remember that being a seminary theme when I was growing up.
Yes.
In but not of. I'm already losing it. What is it? In the world but not of the world,
but
kind
not
of thing.
Of the world, exactly.
But also chosen, right?
Right. And
so you get the persecution that makes you double down in your commitment because you feel extra special, and the persecution becomes evidence of your specialness, right?
Yes, exactly. And I would read those words of Jesus, that if you have been persecuted in my name, then I forgot what the promise is, but anyway, it meant something, and if people would laugh about it, then it meant that I was valiant, So I kind of was trying to be this uber Mormon, really. I read all the scriptures, like including the Old Testament, by the age of 14.
That's precocious.
Yes, I was a precocious child. And I was the one in our family also that would tell them to have family home evenings or scripture study and prayer and stuff. And my parents were the ones that would be reluctant. And because I don't know, they maybe felt it was too much work. But so, yeah, I was really, really, and I remember from a very young age, my greatest desire was to be a good person, so to be worthy, to be like Jesus kind of thing, so that was really strong. And still, I felt like because my family was a bit on the outside, my father was often sick. He became more and more sick and couldn't go to church a lot of times. And he had been excommunicated, and he was a bit weird. And my mother was very timid and all this, so I felt like I had to prove, to the other members that I was a good member. And then as a woman also, I felt a bit second class, because as I was reading the scriptures, there were no women, or hardly any. So, where was the female equivalent of Nephi or Moroni or even Joseph Smith? I couldn't find any. I mean, Emma obviously had been a bad person. At least that's how I was taught, so it's like, it was very difficult to feel like I was of equal value. And so I remember, like, when I was about 15, maybe 16, President Monson, he was an apostle then, came to Switzerland. And just maybe a year or two before, President Benson had been here. And that's when the Bern state, or it was a district, was made a state. And President Benson was here, and I shook his hand, but he didn't even look at me. So I was extremely disappointed by that. And then when President Monson came, he wasn't a prophet yet, he was an apostle. I really wanted to shake his hand again, because I felt like I was just not important. If I died, Jesus would not even pay me any attention. He would be saying, hi, Anna, and oh, there's Nephi, bye, you know. That's how I felt. And so this was really important to me that Elder Monson would see, or President Monson would see me. And I prayed about it, and I was in the choir. And then he gave a talk, and this is like one of my faith stories. He gave a talk about shaking hands. You know, one of his famous talks about all the kids' hands he shook, I think in Hawaii or somewhere. They had faith that he would shake their hands.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh no, you know, I don't have enough faith. He won't shake mine. But to make a long story short, he did shake my hand. And he did see me, and he told me I had beautiful eyes and a beautiful smile. And it was like, it meant so much to me. It was like Heavenly Father saying that to me. So, of course, I loved President Monson for many years dearly because of that. And so it was like, so that was like one of the special stories for me as a young person.
You know, I really relate to that as well. I grew up in Houston. So the prophets and apostles were just those people you saw during General Conference, but they were kind of the equivalent of heroes. And I remember when President Benson was my cousin, but I never knew him. He's a distant cousin, but when he came to Houston for an area conference and I got to ride in the car with him and shake his hand, it was like I'd met Jesus. I mean, not quite, but I mean, it was the closest thing I could have felt. To feeling like I had met a divine being, you know, was a Mormon general authority. Even growing up in Texas, I felt the same wonder.
And for me, it really was as if Heavenly Father had told me, no, you do matter, you know, that kind of thing. And when I was about 60, should I already tell how I got testimony?
Let me just ask a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
What was feminism like in Switzerland at the time? In other words, were women working? Would there have been a feminist awakening such that would have informed why you felt left out or noticed that there weren't women leaders or prophets? Was Switzerland maybe more progressive in terms of feminism than maybe the United States would have been in the 70s?
Oh, not at all. You know, that's the sad thing. You know, Switzerland didn't get the vote for women until like 73 or something. I mean, embarrassingly late, you know. And then my own mother was just quite the opposite of a feminist. You know, she never worked. She could not speak up to my dad at all. I think it was more something in me, you know. And it's like when my father would say to me, my father thought I was intelligent, you know, and then he would say, well, you know, you're really intelligent. I think you'll make a great nurse. And I would say, you mean doctor? You know, or he would say, you'll make a great secretary. And I would say, you mean boss? You know, it was more
that was just you. That was just you.
Yeah, it was just me, you know, and it, I mean, not as I am now, but there was always this, and I could see that my mother was like under my father's rule, you know, and I would be the one that would defend her, and I would be the one that would speak up to my dad, and I would say no, you know. And I remember asking him about polygamy as a young, I said, this makes no sense. And he said, well, you know, in heaven it will all work out. Heavenly Father loves us and things will work out. But that just didn't, you know, I said, but it's not making sense now. It's unfair to women. So no, Switzerland was not particularly forward in that. Well, I think America is more progressive.
Got it. Okay, so
not
that
so
was
much
just
in the
you.
50s either,
You were a natural born feminist.
I guess it's just because I'm a woman, I wanted to be of equal value with a man, you know, and so it just seemed to make sense to me.
Okay.
You know, so.
All right. So how does your story progress?
Well, yeah, when I was 16, I had my best friend in school. She started to investigate the church. I don't remember how that came about, but she did. And so we had the missionaries over and we had her there, and she had a lot of questions for them. And to make a long story short, she did not join the church. In fact, she was not convinced at all. But this caused me to think, you know, do I even know if it's true? So what they had told her, Moroni's promise, I took it to heart, and I decided to put it to the test, you know. And I remember it took me about half a year of every day I prayed and I would read and I would ask. And finally, I felt that I really got this huge answer. And that's probably why I've hung on for so long. But it was actually as I was reading Jacob 2, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and it felt like something like, how can you explain it? It's like I had my eyes opened, and all of a sudden everything made sense. And it was like this overwhelming feeling. And I just felt like, wow, this is all true, you know. And it really, this later, as things got difficult in my life, I always hung on to this, you know, that I had this strong feeling that it was true. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And then let's see, what else?
That's more than I got. So I'm glad you got that.
I know. Yeah, well, sometimes I wish I hadn't, because, yeah, things might have gone differently.
Right.
But I did.
Okay. So adolescence.
Yes. I was like in our ward, it was a very small ward. You know, I don't even know if it was a ward. I think it was a branch. The Bern branch. And I was the only girl in the entire mutual. You know, there were some guys in that age group, but I was the only girl. And so that was kind of hard. Like the next one in age was like 6 years younger and one 6 years older. But there was like nobody in that same age group. But I had a fantastic mutual teacher, leader, whatever. She did everything with me as if there were 20 of us, you know, like, and she was only 11 years older. And she's still one of my best friends. She's still a believing Mormon, but even after everything, she stayed with me. So she's a fantastic person. And so
that means, you know, when I think about my Mormon upbringing, there were ward dances, stake dances, regional dances, all these massive stake youth activities. Did you have any of that in your Swiss Mormon teenage upbringing?
we did.
Okay.
We
Just
had
not in your
stake
ward.
dances.
You just not
Right,
your
just
ward.
in the ward, there was like nobody. There were some guys, you know, but they were all older. And so I was a bit shy, and, you know, it took a long time. And we're now friends, but weren't friends when I was a teenager. But, I didn't really like the dances very much, because I don't know, I had these ugly glasses, and I guess I was ugly, you know, I don't know. But I just didn't get asked to dance, you know. So for me, they were more of an ordeal, you know, to go to endure, because every time you would be left on the side. And it didn't occur to me to go, or it just wasn't done that the girls would ask the guys. Nowadays, they do it that way, and everybody dances, or the girls dance together, and it's fun, but we didn't have that. So finally, I decided to just find another girl that was just like me, left out, and befriend her. And so then I enjoyed those dances more. But we also had like road shows, and those were a lot of fun. And I was really good at writing plays and stuff, and we won a couple of them that I had written. So that was something that I was good at, you know. And we had some fun camps, you know. And as a matter of fact, Philipp, that you have already interviewed, I met him in one of those summer camps. And, you know, so that's how we knew each other as teenagers. He was from the other stake, from the Zurich stake, and I was from the Bern stake. But yeah, that's we kind of became friends during one of those summer camps. And so I made some really good friends there that have remained friends over the years.
That's great. Yeah, those are some of my best memories too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Where did that? Oh, so you had your boyfriend.
Oh, yes. That's at the end of adolescence. Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. Like I said, in the school, I was a little bit an outsider. I never got to go to to their snow camps because my father was afraid of bad influence and all this.
What's a snow camp? What does that mean?
That just means skiing camp. I don't know what you would call it in English.
Schools did that. They sponsored.
Yes, schools did that every year, and I never got to go, which means I don't know how to ski. That's my father's fault.
That's outrageous.
That's terrible. Yeah, I did learn later, like when I was 34 with my kids, but it was a bit late. It was a bit late to overcome the fear. But yeah, so I wasn't allowed to go there. And so I was a bit on the outside in my class, but I decided at some point to win their friendships because I started to see that these were really good people and that my dad was wrong about them all being drug addicts and, you know, bad people. And so I actually got contacts that helped a lot. And I started to just hang out with them. And I became good friends with several people in my class. I became popular. And there was this one guy in particular that I got to know better and better. And yeah, we fell in love. And this was just the last year, just before graduation. And what I really liked, well, for one thing, I found out there were lots of really good people outside of the church. You know, he was like he probably still is a really good person, but he was like also praying. He was reading in the Bible. I had no idea there were other people that did this in this class, you know. And he never drank or smoked or anything like that. And we could talk about everything. And he really respected my views and my thoughts. And so, yeah, we fell in love. And then he is a Spanish guy. And his plan was after graduation to go back to Spain. His family had already moved down there. So he was only by himself here, and then he was going to join me. And so my plan was to go with him. But my father felt I should ask the bishop. And I went and asked the bishop. And the bishop said, oh, no, you shouldn't really go with your boyfriend to Spain. It's not safe. And he told me this story about, you know, I think it's from President Kimball, where when you drive a car down a dangerous mountain road, you know, you don't want to drive to the edge, you know, you want to drive that right down the middle. And me going to Spain, he compared to driving on the edge. So I told him I couldn't go with him. And he told me years later that that was the moment when he felt I was in the hands of some kind of a cult, where a bishop could tell me whether I could go on vacation or not with my boyfriend. And that's when he lost all interest in Mormonism. But he didn't tell me that then. And I thought, you know, I was being good and I was sacrificing what I really wanted to do for Jesus and all this stuff, you know. And I didn't go. And that's probably one of my biggest regrets I have in life. Well, not so much anymore, but it was for a long time. Yeah, but then we started writing, and I thought for sure he would join the church. And he read the entire Book of Mormon, and he's a very intelligent guy. And he sent me back 300 questions about the Book of Mormon.
Whoa.
Yeah, and there was stuff in there like there was no steel at that time in America. There were no horses. There were no wheels. All this stuff.
Was he like reading B.H. Roberts? I mean, how did he think of all this? I have
no idea how. I don't know. And he doesn't recall it. Huh. I've asked him, how did he come up with? I think he came up with this stuff on his own because he's very well read. Or maybe he did find this somewhere from somebody. But this was like.
I guess the Tanners stuff would have been out by then.
Yeah, but there was no internet. How would he have had that?
Right,
this was in 1984.
Yeah, yeah.
Know? So, of course, I dismissed all that. You know, I didn't even look at it. And I thought this was just another opinion. And it was, I actually felt at the time there must be an answer to all these questions. I just don't know it, you know, so I didn't really take it seriously. And so, yeah, then he broke up with me, and he didn't really explain it, but years later he said it was because he could see I was so indoctrinated that I wasn't gonna move from that, you know, and he realized that we would not work out together because of that. So when I found out about that later, that was, for me, it was very hard. I thought, yeah, had I not been so, but anyway. I had a really, really hard time with this. And I think this is the first time where I almost lost my faith after he broke up with me.
How did you make the connection between that and your faith?
Well, I had, for example, another friend in the same ward. There was actually finally another girl. And she was from a family that worked at the embassy, the Mexican family. And she had been very, you know, on and off, inactive. I knew that she stole and she shoplifted, basically. She did all sorts of things. She didn't really care about the church. But then she had a boyfriend. He took the discussions and he joined the church. And I was so upset with God. I said, how is this fair? I have been nothing but faithful. I've done everything. And I asked only one thing from you, that this boyfriend of mine would join the church, you know, and instead he broke up with me. And this other guy just joined the church. And that seemed so unfair. And plus I started to think about all the things he had said, you know, the questions he had had, and I really went down into an existential crisis. I was starting to read Nietzsche and Sartre and Camus and all that stuff.
That's Camus and Sartre for you English Americans that don't understand the true pronunciations.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, and so I really was very desperate, but I had nobody. Since this boyfriend had left me, right? I had nobody outside the church that I could turn to or that could help me. And so I had only one way of dealing with all this, and this was turning back to the church. You know, that was my only way of survival. And so I decided I wanted to go to BYU. I thought I never want to date another non-Mormon. I'm done with that pain. You know, I'm going to go to BYU and find a husband there. But I prayed that God would show me what I should do. And I read this quote that said, you have to do what God wants you to do when he wants you to do it and how he wants you to do it. I thought, okay. And then I went to the bishop to get him to sign my code of honor thing. And he looked at me and he says, I think you should go on a mission. And in that moment, I thought, oh, that's what God wants me to do. And I said, okay. And I decided to go on a mission just like that, you know.
And you mentioned in your outline but you did mention in your outline that you were suicidal about this breakup of this relationship.
I was standing many times like at the train tracks and thinking it would be just so easy. But you know, I was so sure there was an afterlife. I thought it's not going to bring me anything to kill myself. I'll just continue, and then it'll be worse because I will have done this terrible thing. So in a way, that kept me, actually, that much faith I had, that I just was sure it was going on afterwards. So, and when I turned back to faith, like I turned back, it was literally, I don't know if you know that story from Kierkegaard, where he said how he gained his faith. He said it was like a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And that's how it was with me. And I made that leap that time. This time not, but that time. And I said, I want to believe. And I was able to fully believe again. It was really strange. And then, you know, when that bishop said you should go on a mission, it just felt so right. That's what God wants me to do.